Patrick, yourself and New Relic.
Sure. Well, I've been spending the last 10 years or so kind of in the testing space and the performance space. Did a couple startups and ended up at a company called Gomez. Some of you might have heard of them. They're now part of CompuWare. And along the way, spent a lot of time doing monitoring services, developing and product managing monitoring services for mobile apps, mobile web apps, mobile native apps. In my most recent job, I was working for a company called Newstar that not a lot of people have heard of, but also doing real device testing and looking at the performance characteristics of phones. These days, I work for a company called New Relic, which is officially a San Francisco-based company, but about half of it is up here. And you might have heard we raised $80 million just a few weeks ago.
Beers on Patrick after the meeting.
So we're having a lot of fun. It's growing really fast. And in that announcement, we did mention that we were going to use some of that money for doing some interesting things in mobile. My boss and the CEO would kill me if I gave it all away tonight, but we'll see how much I'll talk about that. Yeah, more beer. So yeah, that's what we're up to.
What was your last venture?
It was a company called Browser Mob, and it did cloud-based load testing, and that included some testing services that we had around simulating what happens when tons of mobile devices connect to your website. And there are definitely very different characteristics of mobile devices in terms of the impact on your server infrastructure. So it was a pretty interesting process.
Great. Does New Relic have an app?
We do.
So New Relic, they have lots of money. They're trying to drive leads in for people. You're swimming in it. You swim through the front door of money, and you're trying to get more developers to use your software for testing, right? So there must be this big lead gen process and marketing machine and salespeople. And so I go to the website. Is your website responsive website where it shrinks down, or if I'm on my device, does it do a mobile website?
We are admittedly kind of bad about having a responsive design with our website. It pretty much renders the way it would on a desktop experience.
Patrick.
That'll change next week. And it'll look good. But we went through the same process building our own app, and we were going to do an HTML5 website or wrapped application. If you're not familiar with what that means, it just means it's a thin native program that then puts the web browser in the app. So it's still fairly easy to build. There's a lot of great toolkits to make that pretty easy to get rolling with. But ultimately, we decided the experience we wanted required a native app. Specifically, it's not out in the current version of the app, but we're going to be allowing this really cool pinch to zoom to get the performance history of your graphs and swipe around. And we just couldn't get the experience we wanted nailed with a web browser. I am sure in time that will catch up, but it just wasn't quite there. I do want to say, though...
Can you go to the next slide? I think this is what he's talking about. Is this what you're talking about?
Yeah, is that Frankenstein?
Native crushing HTML5?
But I want to say that it's not quite like that, because here's the thing, like I use the native Facebook app personally, and it drives me crazy every time I come over to the couch and I see my wife on Safari on her phone at facebook.com, and she's using like this clunky version of it, but she doesn't mind. That's what she does. She's just so used to it. And in fact, what we've seen talking to some of our customers and seeing ourselves is that even when you have a native app, it's kind of like a tide to raise all boats. You actually start getting more web app mobile traffic as well, because people are responding to your application. Maybe there's functionality that's only in the web version because it's limited in the native one, and so they're starting to push the boundaries. They're clicking on email alerts. There's all sorts of reasons why people come to your site through the web experience too. So you kind of, in a way, have to commit to both. If you're
Didn't Zuckerberg say the biggest mistake he made last year was betting too much in HTML5?
There might have been a few other ones.
Tracking. There is a super nerdy tracking guy in the house, Patrick Lightbody. Patrick, can you talk a little bit about tracking on the side of what entrepreneurs should be thinking about when they're building an app?
Okay, well, I'll just
and maybe just walk through just really briefly the sections here.
You know, I think analytics is probably the most interesting topic relevant to what we were just talking about. If you're going to do a website, just a web app, there's a lot of pretty standard ways to track the activity on that web app. Just throw Google Analytics up there and you can kind of not worry about it that much. But once you commit to those native interactions, or also more rich AJAX single-page web apps, they both kind of suffer from the same problem. The classic page view event goes away, and it's really gets a lot more complicated if you want to try to measure engagement, intent, activity of your users. And it gets even tougher with native apps, where you can probably only ship it once a month or so because of the delivery model going through an app store. You really have to get those analytics right the first time. You can't sort of iterate on it. So like at New Relic today, we use Mixpanel. We think it's a great tool. And we're tweaking things and sort of getting the right reports out of it on a daily basis. Obviously, for our native app, we had to be a lot more careful about what we were sending to it. So I'll just caution that. It's a big shift when we pulled away this standard concept of a page view. But anyway, analytics, Mixpanel and Kissmetrics are both pretty well-known startups that are in the space of tracking individual user events rather than classic page views. So it's up to you to instrument your application to send those events to these tools. But if you do, you can get some really great reporting out of it. Obviously Google's the big well-known web analytics company, and then Flurry's really done a lot of focusing on mobile specifically, but is that's kind of their focus. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these have a freemium model, but it's often priced at the volume of events you're sending to it. So I don't know their pricing off the top of my head. I know that we send a ton of traffic to Mixpanel, and we're not paying that much relative to the value we're getting out of it. But a lot of it depends on how important is it for you to know.
Right.
We're in a B2B type of business where we're selling fairly large scale transactions. We need to know if people are walking away from our website or walking away from certain more expensive features. Maybe it's different if you're selling a 99-cent video game. Related to all of this, I think the biggest thing to remember is mobile is just a new and unique challenge, because for the last 15 years, we've gotten really accustomed to having a very small number of places to deploy our code, right? Even the biggest web server farms out there, short of the really big ones, might be a few hundred web servers that you're pushing your code out to. Well, it's easy to update it, relatively speaking. We've got automated systems. You've got companies like Puppet Labs in here that make that really, really easy to get out there. You've got monitoring tools like New Relic and others. But now we're talking about pushing code to millions of devices that don't update very often, that don't have all the standard Linux and Unix tools out there with logging and all the things you'd love to have. And it's like you're completely shrouded in mystery in terms of what the hell is happening amongst your customers. And now you don't have all the analytics stuff that you had with web pages, so you don't even get the page views or what the refer was, because none of those concepts exist in native apps. So you just gotta be ready for that, because it is a pretty big shift if you've gotten really comfortable with how easy we had it in web apps. I was talking about the new and noteworthy promotions, where Apple has a curated team that goes and handpicks certain apps that they will promote out there. And there's no algorithms behind that. It's, did you impress some guy that works at Apple enough to decide to put you up there? And he can change your business completely. And he probably is just paid an average salary, but he has so much control over the industry. And so, I don't know what what a lot of the tricks are, other than what I've observed, which is you just kind of gotta hustle and get to know people in the industry and make connections and work your way closer and closer to that very guarded secret inner circle, and then impress the hell out of them with your app.